Okay, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalam ala Rasulillah. I remember this now. Okay. I mentioned that the hadith of Prophet ﷺ where he said, so for those who weren't here last week or those who forgot, we were doing Kitab al-Fitan, okay, talking about hadith in which the Prophet ﷺ talked about trials and tribulations, fitan, right? And I remember now, I mentioned this hadith that the Prophet ﷺ said that the greatest of jihad is to speak a word of truth or a word of justice in front of an oppressive tyrant, a sultan who is a tyrant. And then I mentioned the fact that I actually got this book from someone who is currently in jail in Saudi. No. Okay. Now, then the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, okay, yeah, then I think we finished with this hadith. Okay, no, we didn't mention this one. Then I'll mention another hadith, okay? It might seem a bit distant to you, but I think it's important to mention since so many of you are always thinking about marriage, inshallah, right? I made the joke, right? Marriage Student Association. It is true. I was one of the only few people in my MSA who did not get married to another MSA person. And I actually feel proud of it. It's so rare. It's fit. Okay. So yeah, so that's why I call it Marriage Student Association. It's a good joke though, because it works. It's true. Okay. Everyone's all awkward. Anyways, I'm not gonna ask anything else. So the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Inna iblis yada'u arshahu ala al-ma' thumma yab'athu sarayahu فأدناهم منه منزلة أعظمهم فتنة يجيء أحدهم فيقول فعلت كذا وكذا فيقول ما صنعت شيئا قال ثم يجيء أحدهم فيقول ما تركته حتى فرقت بينه وبين امرأته قال فيدنيه منه ويقول نعم أنت. There's a famous hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that Shaitan has his throne over the water. And we're not told exactly what this is meant by this. Okay, it doesn't mean Shaitan's throne is on the ocean somewhere. Okay. Oh, hey, didn't see there. Okay, some people, obviously by some people I mean like random people online. Like, oh, this means Shaitan's arsh is, in the Bermuda Triangle or something. No, okay. We don't know if the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam what exactly he meant to be by al ma. Okay, is this something actually like water, like we have water, you know, today, like an ocean or a sea, or is it something else? ثم يبعث سراياه, and Shaitan will send his sort of like, almost like his soldiers, right? فأدناهم منه منزلة أعظمهم فتنة. The ones closest to him are the ones who cause the most harm, the fitna, trials, tribulations amongst families. Sorry, I was in my throat. That's going to keep happening. يجيء أحدهم فيقول فعلت كذا وكذا. Some of them will come to Shaitan and they say to him, I did this and that. And he says, you haven't done anything. Shaitan, right? Says to that the actual Shaitan, Iblis, says to the other shayateen, the jinn or the humans, you haven't done anything. And then another of them comes and he says, another of these shayateen come to him and they say that I basically caused a split between this husband and his wife, essentially a divorce, right? And he says, and Shaitan brings that jinn closer to him, and he says, "Ni'ma anta," that you're the one who did a good job, basically, or you're the one who did the right thing, or you're the good one. Now this hadith, when last time we were talking about this, we were talking about more in a political sense, right? But really, I mean, the breakdown, first of all, of the family structure is related to politics and society as well, right? The less human beings become focused on the family, the more they become focused on themselves or something else, like their tribe. Tribe is part of family, sorry, more like something else, right? You're trying to get people to be attached to something else, whether it be entertainment or, um, you know, your nation state, for example, right? Now, one thing, I don't know if I should mention this, implicating myself. No, forget it. Okay, I used to work in Saudi as a teacher at a university, okay? And it was implicitly understood, it even told to us that the reason we're there is to make sure the young people there don't revolt against the government because they need some sort of hope in their future, right? So I took part in that basically. Astaghfirullah. Teaching English, right? But one thing you realize from that is that the culture there is doing the same thing to them, right? The culture they get from Netflix and YouTube and whatnot is doing the same thing to them in that it's breaking up their families, making them more individualistic, concerned more about fulfilling their own needs, their own desires, as opposed to caring more about people around you, right? I think we mentioned this last time. You probably have a relative somewhere back home whose house is like a revolving door, right? They have like relatives coming in and out, right? A lot of families back home, they're like this, right? And you always wonder when you see those kinds of families, how do people, sometimes it's hard for us to stand our own siblings or immediate family, right? But these people have a revolving door of distant relatives coming in and out, and they're, entertaining them on a regular basis, on a weekly or monthly basis. So how is that? So this it's not just yes. It starts with marriage, and it starts with the immediate family unit. Okay, so I might as well mention this. I mention this to younger people anyway, so I might as well mention it here since you guys are closer to that age. Marriage. Okay. I know a lot of folks here understand this already, in theory, but I guess to drill it home more, it's very tempting to think of marriage as like the way it's portrayed in popular media. Who's that? Okay. Yeah, it's very easy to think of marriage the way it's portrayed in popular media. Okay, it's just two people coming together and then all these what is going on? Oh, okay, my bad. Yeah, I was like, that's creepy. Anyways, if you live in the Middle East for quite a bit of time, you become paranoid. Right? No, no, trust me. I lived in Saudi and Cairo. Okay, Saudi, same place. Saudi, same place. I used to work King Saud University. I always assumed there was somebody in my classroom who was a spy. Every teacher, you assume that, right? Cairo, and the stories I've heard, I'll tell you one. No one's listening, right? Oh, it's online. My bad. How many people online? Why is Miriam online? Is that Sammy? No? Oh, it's just there. So one thing, I'll tell you a story, and this shows you, by the way, the kinds of people that exist out there, just so you know, right? It's important to know this stuff. When I was in Cairo, my sheikh, for sure I told you guys this. When my sheikh told me a story about, so my sheikh was teaching me Bukhari, and he said there was a guy here who used to study Sahih Bukhari. He used to even lead the other students in prayer. Okay, so he knew like Hafs and Asim, he had memorized the Qira'ah and he was reciting it too, and he was leading people in prayer. And he was with them for like 2 or 3 years. And then he left. A few months after he left, they found out he was a CIA agent. He wasn't even Muslim. Okay? Like, this is the kind of stuff that exists out there. I'm just letting you know, right? So I'm very paranoid, okay, because I've seen, heard, experienced a lot of stuff. Few people I know, scholars I know are in jail, okay? There's always somebody listening. I always assume the worst. And then I still say stuff anyway, which is, I don't understand that myself. But the whole point is, guys, the family structure, okay, to think of marriage in the way Hollywood sort of presents it, is dangerous, right? Because the way marriage is understood in the West, it's still a very individualistic exercise. I get married for myself. I get married to fulfill my needs. I get married to fulfill or self-actualize myself, right? But marriage is more than that. And unfortunately, a lot, like, that you don't actually realize what marriage is not until like you're 2 or 3 years into marriage and you have your first kid, for example, right? Then you realize what marriage is not. Unfortunately, a lot of people don't realize what marriage is, though, because they're not taught it by their parents, or because they don't see good enough role models, or they're so engrossed in the culture they don't understand what it's about. Marriage is more than just fulfilling our needs. Marriage is, we're taking part in society, right? We're contributing to society. When Like literally, you have families who raise their children on corruption and sin. We want to contribute to ensuring that we continue families in righteousness and iman, right? So we're not just, it's not just something, that's why iman, I mean, sorry, that's why for us, marriage is more than that, right? The whole hadith about marriage being half of faith, that's not something insignificant, right? To think about. Marriage being half of faith is a serious issue. That shows us that marriage is more than just, you know, making things halal, as people say, right? Or people think about it. Like most people think about it in terms of like making a relationship halal, for example, or making, I mean, the technical fiqh definition of it is to make intimate relations halal, at least for Shafis. But it's more than that, right? You're literally fulfilling half of iman, and half of iman, not just iman in your personal sense, but iman like Islam itself, right? You're completing half of faith. That there's so many things associated with marriage. For example, inheritance, right? A lot of the things to do with marriage, the religious aspects, so things like marriage, divorce, raising children righteously, not just righteously, but then also in case of divorce, things that happen, rulings that need to happen, the things you learn, the personality aspects, how people's personality changes or is affected by marriage, right? They don't learn the necessary lessons. They don't become more caring. They don't become more understanding. They don't learn to reconcile, right? Or see the other person's perspective. All these things, they're all technically either akhlaq or iman or something, and they all affect everything else, right? So, like, for example, divorce, right? Which is mentioned here. Even if divorce occurs, it has to be done properly. Even in Muslim countries, and that's divorce, even in Muslim countries, the amount of times divorce is done improperly, either it's oppressing the female or it's done in a way that harms the male, right? Or in inheritance, man, inheritance, may Allah fix our homes, okay, our countries back home. Inheritance is a serious issue. The amount of families that get destroyed because of inheritance issues, people don't distribute the inheritance properly. Somebody, like you probably heard stories, right? But even like religious people, I've seen religious families, families living in the Muslim world where the inheritance doesn't get distributed properly, right? But this whole section of fiqh that we're talking about here, right? This whole aspect of interactions with other people on a purely family level basis, not like the marketplace, for example. That's a kitab al-buyur, right? Chapters of transactions where you talk about how to conduct tons of transactions with other people. But specifically, chapters of things like marriage and stuff and whatnot and divorce, there is so much that happens that's incorrect and causes harm to society, right? I mean, just the fact that, let's be honest, us living here, yeah, unless you have a lot of extended family here, usually if there's no extended family, it's not really a good environment for kids to be in, to be honest. Okay. I don't want to make anyone hopeless or anything, but that's just the case. Okay. Because if your parents are not home, the only parent you have left is the television or social media, for example, right? That becomes a sort of a parent because it has an influence on the child. So all these things, okay, when shaitan is putting so much emphasis on breaking down families, okay, why is that? Why does he take so much pride in that? Or why is he like that so much? It's because it has a huge, massive corrupting effect on society. It for our individual selves, of course, okay. Now I don't know, I'm not going to take a census of this here. I have noticed a lot of young people your age saying that they never want to get married. I'm not sure how common you guys see this. Okay, no, maybe not in the MSA. Outside the MSA, maybe. Okay, outside the MSA, MSA is Marriage Student Association, right? But like outside the MSA, though, okay, I've just noticed this. There's an increasing number of young people saying, "I never want to get married because I don't think that XYZ will happen or whatever not, or I think I'll be, not treated properly, etc." All those things have to be negotiated somehow, right? But it's a problem. It's a problem because if people no longer see and let's be honest, 100 years ago, why did people get married? A lot of it, the reasons more than 100 years ago, right? For most of human history, marriage was to do with economic benefit, right? You got married, you had safety, first of all. You had a family unit, you had, economic benefit benefits. You had children so they could work, for example, the farm or whatever else, right? You'd have more people to help out in the family, right? There'd be a lot going on, basically. Now, having kids seems like I have kids because I want to have kids, or I just want kids, right? So we don't always see the sort of necessity of it anymore. But at the same time, human nature is still intrinsically linked with the idea of family. Animals in general, even if you study evolutionary biology, right, the continuation of species, like literally evolutionary biology, the entire purpose of life is to continue to exist, to survive until the next generation, right? So even from that perspective, it's kind of there. But even Islamically speaking, like the aspect of family, of marriage is so intrinsically linked to who we are as human beings and as Muslims that you can't risk thinking about marriage the wrong way, right? So, it's just the fact that shaitan, this comes in Kitab al-Fitan, right? The fact that shaitan, and, so far, like I said, we've been talking about things like, talking in the face of a tyrant, right? And other things like, for example, murder and killing that will spread, and that in times of fitna, making hijrah to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? Or making hijrah to ibadah, sorry, is like making hijrah to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. These kinds of, and we're comparing it to Gaza, right? But these dire situations, in the same vein, there's a hadith that comes up about divorce, which means that this is also a huge fitna, right? So, sometimes people think, oh, what's happening in Gaza, I need to, I feel helpless, I need to do something. You can do a lot still for the ummah without having to go anywhere. Okay, I know there's a lot of people going into like counseling therapy and stuff, by the way, which is a separate topic. One of the dangers of people going into counseling is that it's a really positive thing that's happening. More Muslims going into counseling and therapy and stuff. But one of the possible dangers that can happen from that is if you don't know the Islamic aspects of those things, you're in big trouble, right? So, anyways, so that's a whole issue by itself. So, so that's one aspect of it. Okay. Now, again, switching back to complete different, we went into like family stuff here, society, and how that's a fitna by itself. Going back to, again, similar topics we were talking about before. Now we're no longer talking about an external threat. We're talking about an internal one, where the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Man hamala alayna as-silaha falaysa minna, wa man ghashana falaysa minna." I.e., whoever carries weapons against us is not from us, and whoever cheats us or deceives us is not from us as well, right? So the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam clearly here talking about internal issues, right? And this is also a serious source of fitna, because the Prophet sallallahu spoke about the Sahaba couldn't even think about it, which is why they asked him questions about this, right? The Sahaba, when he talked to the Prophet spoke to Sahaba, he said, if there's a zalim and a madloom, right, or there's two Muslims fighting each other, right? Which one is sinful, right? And both of them are sinful. And Sahaba asked why, because they couldn't even understand the situation. They weren't even living that yet. They were going to eventually. They didn't know that during Ali's time. This is Islamic history, right? During Ali and Muawiyah's time, all the stuff that happened then, they were eventually going to live it. But at that time, they didn't understand, because the person who is going to kill, the person who kills the other Muslim in war, yes, he had the intent. He actually killed the other person, but the person who died also had the intention to kill him as well, right? So this is, this shows internal issues as well. You can't only worry about external issues. Unfortunately, we have internal problems as well. First of all, those who literally think it's okay to fight against Muslims. Now, one thing I will say, mostly because a lot of people have misconceptions about this, as far as I've seen. Some people do, not always, right? But let's be straightforward, okay? Some folks say that all the stuff that happens in Muslim countries or here even, like these, okay, guys, I speak about politics and I weave in and out of politics without thinking, because it's just that's just how I speak, okay? But I'll just say it, okay? So if you guys get scared, want me to stop, let me know. ISIS and stuff and Al-Qaeda, okay, when I was in Riyadh and Cairo, there were several suicide bombings and stuff there, okay? With all honesty, some people go like, oh, all these, okay, whether 9/11 was an inside job, I don't know, okay? I'm not going to get into that. Okay, maybe you guys have heard about that or not. That was my generation's conspiracy theory, okay? Whether that's true or not, I don't care. All I know is that those kinds of extremists are real, okay? They're real. They do exist. without giving too much away. I've seen some of them. Okay. But I've seen some of them. But the whole point is those kinds of extremists do exist. Okay. Unfortunately, they do. There are people like that. And of course, worse than that are these tyrants, these oppressive rulers who think it's completely okay to kill their own citizens who are Muslims. And the Prophet is saying those kinds of people are not from us. These people are not, you know, honest. They're not sincere towards Muslims. And in all honesty, without saying any names, okay, people who associate with these people, and they pretend like these people have the best interests of Muslims in mind, they're fooling themselves. Okay. The best thing to do is to stay away from these kinds of people. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is not in this. He also said that whoever goes to a ruler and believes his lies, then like he will be entered into the fire. Right? So like, and by the way, it's most scholars around the world consider it inappropriate for a scholar to be seen with politicians and rulers. Okay. Now, of course, there's a difference of opinion on that in terms of, you know, what if you can affect the ruler in a positive way? Unfortunately, though, most cases nowadays it doesn't happen. Okay. And then وَمَنْ غَشَّنَا فَلَيْسَ مِنَّا. Whoever deceives the Muslims also is not from them as well. Okay. Now, of course, in politics, this happens, right? There's people who literally deceive Muslims, Muslims who deceive Muslims into doing whatever they want to do, other things in da'wah, which I'm not going to get into. But of course, I want to talk about a more mundane thing, which is business. Okay. I don't know if you guys eventually, as you get older, you might have heard this already, but a lot of Muslims don't want to do business with other Muslims. Why? Because they always find they're cheating in business or they're going to, you know, rob them of. And it's unfortunately, it is kind of true. It does happen. I've seen it quite a bit. I don't want to generalize though. I don't want to stereotype because, you know, there's a lot of non-Muslims who cheat in business as well. I personally think it's a racial problem. It's not a religious problem. I think there are certain ethnicities which have a problem with this, pointing to my own ethnicity, okay, Pakistanis and Indians. Desis have some problem with fraud. I'm not sure what it is, okay, but I don't know if they felt cheated or something by the British. Something happened, something stuck in their mentality, okay. But the whole point is, even in mundane things like business, okay. I remember, by the way, before I left Saudi, I had to sell my car. Before you leave, you have to get rid of all your stuff. And I remember, like, because it's a big sale, right? It's not like a small thing. It's not like you're selling, like, you know, I don't know, small things at a stand. But I had to sell my car, and I remember like how difficult it was to be honest to the person, like about how old it was, because I had been in a lot of accidents. Saudi, right? It wasn't only me. It was usually I got hit in the back, but there was few of my fault too. Saudi, every year I got into a car accident. Okay, that's just Saudi. It's just madness in the road. If you ever go there, you'll know you'll figure out yourself. But the whole point is, I was in a collision every year, and I remember people ask me, "How many collisions has it had, right? Or what kind of issues has the car had?" And I remember it because I just wanted as much money as possible before I leave Saudi for good, right? And I remember how difficult it was. Like I remember I had to like fight myself to say the truth, right? And this is the problem, though, right? Like if we cheat in things like business, then what do you expect when Muslims go into politics? You're going to do the same thing, right? And you know, on the topic of that's cheating and deception. What about dhulm? Oppression is another one. I usually mention this. It's not here. Oppression. We often think of these tyrants and these oppressors and these rulers in our countries as people who are really evil people who only serve their own interests and their family. Let's be honest. How many Muslim families are like that, right? Where the parents, I've seen many cases as parents not just with their children. Okay. And also, so parents not just with their children, they don't divide things equally amongst their children. They let their emotions get the better of them. They don't treat their children fairly and equally. Okay. These things, unfortunately, are common. And on top of that, when it comes to some sort of issue, um, I'm not sure. I think I mentioned this previously, but I had a 40-something-year-old person like getting spiritual counseling from me because his dad cut him off in some business deal. Okay. And this is like a religious family, right? Um, like older people too, right? So this is a problem, right? When dunya gets in the way, can you deal with it even in a small issue like, or a smaller stage like family? And if you can't be just in issues of family, how are you going to be just in the world, in politics? If you can't stop yourself from deceiving people in business, let's take it a more mundane example, even more than trade or selling, a resume. Okay? Deception on a resume as well. It happens a lot, right? And of course, I know it's a competitive job market, whatever not, okay, all these sorts of things. Or in an application for grad school, for example, okay, it's part of taqwa. It's part of, like we mentioned this last week, right? The deen and dunya, there's no separation between the two. It's part of deen as well to have taqwa when writing that um, graduate studies application or putting that resume in, right? That we don't lie and we expect that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who is Ar-Razzaq. He is the one who plans our qadr. Okay, and we don't need to resort to haram means to do things. So all these things, okay. This hadith, by the way, comes up, it's usually famous in schools, right? Arab students mention it. "Man ghashala falaysa minna." They're like, oh, don't cheat in exams. But applies to everything, right? It applies to everything. And deception, unfortunately, when Muslims use it against each other, they're the ones fooling each other. Mariam, you did Islamic history with me, right? Remember anything? No, sorry, that one. You remember anything? Huh? You do? Okay, I won't do it. I won't grill you here. But just one example I mentioned to the Islamic history students I have when I come to the Ottoman Empire. One of the reasons, it's not a major reason, it's a reason amongst many other reasons. One of the reasons why the Ottoman Empire, I know there's theories against decline, but pardon me, I'm going to go with the decline theory for now. So the latter half of the Ottoman Empire, one of the reasons why it started declining, and one of the reasons, and when you understand the scope of this, it kind of blows your mind how many things it sort of impacted along the way. The Ottoman trade officials they used to tax the trade. The Ottoman Empire used to make a lot of money taxing trade through the empire because the Ottoman Empire was right in the middle of Asia, Europe, and Africa, right? They used to make a lot of money through tariffs. You tax the trade coming in and out, right? So what ended up happening was eventually these trade officials, they became corrupt and they started charging bribes on top of the taxes to merchants, non-Muslims, Muslims, it doesn't matter, right? And they started charging bribes as well as these taxes. So things became prohibitively expensive for the merchants. They weren't making profit to the point where there's actually records of this, where like ships in the Red Sea coming to the port in Jeddah, right? There used to be like 20 ships coming a year, and the number in like a few decades went down to like 3 or 4 because people didn't want to trade through that territory anymore because of all the bribes, how expensive it was. They weren't making profit. And Europeans were in that too. And that's one of the reasons why the Portuguese and the Spanish started looking for alternate routes to trade with India and Persia so they can bypass the Ottoman taxes and bribes. And the Portuguese try to sail all the way around Africa just so they can get silk and spices and whatever not from the east. Spain thinks there's another way to India. They go there, they think they found India. It's actually North America or South America, right? Why did all that happen is linked to all of these bribes and whatever not, okay? So that small action, you think you're only benefiting yourself or you think it's only a sin for yourself. Some of these sins, and again, goes back to like marriage and stuff too, right? So a lot of these sins, we think it's only something to do with us, but when you compound it together, it becomes common in society. These sins start to break down society itself, right? Um, like sins during marriage, for example, right? Either oppression of one's family, or for example, oppression of one's husband as well, or not giving the husband their rights, not giving the wife their rights. It seems like a very trivial, almost, I don't want to say trivial stuff, but like, it seems like it's like a limited sin, limited to the couple, right? But when that becomes common in society, then and then the children suffer as a result of that as well. Children not being raised properly as well. Parents don't care about the deen of the children either. All of that stuff percolates down and it creates a crisis in society itself, right? So what started as a sin between in one person or two people ended up being a sin throughout all of society and causing all sorts of other problems. Okay, the example I usually use for this, not this one, actually, riba. Okay, but I don't want to get into a different topic here. Okay, but riba, okay, you can link riba to climate change. Okay, I have a post about this if anyone follows my blog, right? You can link riba to climate change because riba creates artificial money. What it ends up doing is it creates a surplus of capital. Okay, any finance guys here, right? It creates a surplus of capital among lenders, right? Big banks and stuff. So what ends up happening is you have an unlimited source of capital because you can just generate money from nothing by giving out loans, right? And then you have banks on top of that are allowed legally to generate money from nothing, right? What ends up happening is you have an unlimited amount of capital, but you have a limited amount of natural resources. Of course, you're going to destroy the earth, right? But where did all that come from? All that artificial capital you're generating came from? It started with riba, right? Somebody got a mortgage for a house. They thought, I'm just doing it for myself. You're contributing to a system which is destroying the world, right? All these things, right? Deception, cheating in trade or whatever, in politics and society, right? And then going further out, like fighting against Muslims or whatever it may be. Okay, marriage issues, family issues, not understanding the importance of family, and then riba. Okay, they start as sins, between one or two or three people, and eventually, when they become normalized, though, and they become widespread, then they completely destroy society. And sometimes you don't see the hikmah of Allah. And a lot of people think of, and again, this is secularism as well. We mentioned this last week, right? Secularism, we think of religion as just something private because we're taught to think that by society. Even Muslim countries, they're post-colonial. They're still affected by secularism, right? So we tend to think of sins, even sins. First, we think of ibadah just as a private practice. No, ibadah is also, like we said, you can go out, do fard kifaya in society, even earn money, become an entrepreneur. That's still ibadah. So we tend to think of ibadah in that secularized way. But on top of that, even sins, we think of sins in a secularized way. We don't think about their effects on society and the world, right? We think about them only in terms of, oh, I committed a sin to Allah, so I have to do tawbah, right? You also have to fix the harm your sins caused, right? I mean, like, I tell people this all the time, I've been teaching for 13 years now, teenagers for 7. If I could say there's one thing that can be definitively linked to faith problems in children, okay? Like if you want, like a lot of them are like correlations or like they're odd cases that come up here and there. But if there's one cause I wanted to look for that almost always causes faith issues in young kids or mental health issues as well, it's parents are messed up. Okay? Parents are messed up or they're oppressing the children. And this is religious and non-religious families. It doesn't make a difference, right? Like just the way they're treating their children, a lot of times it drives the kids out of Islam. Okay, and sometimes you find the parents who are not that strict. Okay, they let their kid, like some parents, they completely block like TV and YouTube and Netflix, whatever, right? But some parents, they allow their children to do that, and their kids turn out completely fine. There's nothing religiously wrong with them. I mean, a lot of times it just, you have to be careful about this whole like I said, everything. So many things come down to family, and we don't give it the necessary attention we need to. We talk about it more in a secular sense, like saving marriages because divorce is a bad thing. But why is it a bad thing, right? No worries, don't worry about it. Okay, so no, what time is it? 5 minutes. Went all that in one hadith. All right, let's do one more, and then we'll stop here. Oh, then there's that hadith I just talked about. That if there's two Muslims fighting each other, the killer and the one killed, both go to the fire. Okay, and the Sahaba, that hadith is actually here. We'll do one more. Okay, this is an important one because somebody just asked me about this today. Some kid asked me today, is stunt driving haram? Right? Yeah. Like, or let's say speeding or stunt driving on the roads. I'm going to mention this because I do feel this is a Muslim problem. I just feel like a lot of young people from the East, okay, the way they drive their cars, not just here, but back home too, okay? So this is the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, لا يشير أحدكم على أخيه بالصلاح. That you don't, hey, assalamu alaikum. How are you, man? You're good? I have to sign up for the doctor. No, sorry. Wait, do you have your PhD yet? Sorry, putting on the spot. Anyways, what's it called? Yes, so لا يشير أحدكم على أخيه بالسلاح. That do not point to your brother or sister in faith with a weapon. And to the point, there's another hadith where the Prophet, somebody was carrying a bunch of arrowheads through the masjid, and he said you can't do that. Right? He forbade the person from just carrying arrowheads that were exposed, their tips were exposed to the people in the masjid. فإنه لا يدري لعل الشيطان ينزع في يده فيقع في حفرة من النار. He does not know that perhaps shaitan will cause maybe his hand to slip or be seized or snatched or something, and this person will end up in the hellfire because they hurt someone, they harmed someone, they killed someone, right? So again, we think of this only in terms of weapons. No, it's applied to so many different cases, right? Um, you know, I'm bashing Muslims here, but let's be honest, like, you guys know where most of the fake degrees in the world come from, right? I'm Pakistani, so it's Pakistan, okay? But let's say someone, okay, as a result of their deception or so let's use the car example first, right? Stunt driving, things like that, driving recklessly on the road, this can apply to it because technically if you kill someone by accident in Islamic law, okay, it's still a very serious issue. In Canada, from what I know, it's not that major of an issue, okay? As in, like, you won't have that much legal trouble in Canada if it happened completely as an accident. I think like it's like there's like a hefty fine for it. There's a fine for it. That's about it. But in Islamic law, if you kill somebody by accident, how much would like it comes out to like if you convert like the price of how much the blood money for that was back then, it's around like $300,000. Okay, that's how much money. And if you can't afford to pay, and your family can help you pay that, but or your family or your neighborhood or your community can help you pay that money, but if you can't pay it, technically you're in serious trouble. Muslim countries haven't really figured out how to implement that law properly yet. What they just do is they shove the person in jail until they can pay it. Okay, which is not the best solution either. But the thing is, it's a serious issue. Okay, killing somebody by accident is a very serious issue in Islam. Same thing with harming somebody even by accident. So we actually have to be careful and mindful whatever we're doing to ensure we don't get any harm across to people, right? That we don't harm people in any, we have to be observant about that, right? A lot of times, like, when the Prophet ﷺ mentioned that the lowest branch of faith is to remove a branch from the road. Similar thing, removing harm from people's way, right? This is a maxim in fiqh as well, a qaida, right? Darra yuzal, right? That harm is to be removed. This is a major part of the Sharia, right? It comes up in such small things, like, if there's a tree that bears fruit, I mean, in the old days before bathrooms and stuff, or you're traveling, for example, if there's a tree that bears fruit, you're not allowed to, like, use that high, go behind that and use that as a bathroom, for example, like, or toilet, right? Because somebody might come, you might harm the person who's coming to the tree to pick fruit and to eat it. Like, that's how serious it is, right? Like, even to that extent, you don't harm people. So small things like this, right? Um, the issue of harming another human being, let alone a Muslim, is a very serious issue in Islam. I'll finish off with one hadith. Okay, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I can't remember the exact wording, so as I'm paraphrasing here, the Prophet said, this we talk about Muslims here. The Prophet said, whoever kills a non-Muslim from Ahlul Ahd. Ahlul Ahd means a believer, a disbeliever, whom you have some sort of agreement with. Okay, a citizenship agreement could go in there, but also on top of that, like, an agreement with minorities, for example, okay, a non-Muslim minority or non-Muslims you have treaties, peace treaties with, for example. The Prophet ﷺ said, whoever kills someone from Ahl Ahd, then they will not smell the scent of Jannah, and its smell can be detected from a distance of 40 years travel. Okay, which is serious issue, right? If you think about it, and people, again, إذا ذبحتم فأحسن القتلة. The Prophet said, if you slaughter an animal, then أحسن القتلة, right? That do it with ihsan. Similarly, even in war, Muslims are not like these savages and barbarians, the Israeli army right now, right? Even in warfare, we conduct ourselves in a certain way. So, and even in warfare, when things get really bad, okay, and the enemy is oppressing you, is destroying you, you don't cross that line because you're Muslims, right? And again, this comes down to, like you said, Iman, right, is more, this is the theme, since last week, that Iman is more than just that personal ibadah, it encompasses everything, right? So sins, good deeds, ibadah, everything, it encompasses everything, it affects everything, okay? And we will stop here.